Welcome back everyone to the Satoshi Chain. My name is Adam, and today we're going to be finishing our two-part series on why gold and why Bitcoin. So now we're on to the why Bitcoin story in the millennia in the making. So let's review our proposition so far from last video. I will link the last video here on screen now. But gold is valuable because due to its properties. So there's properties of gold that make it valuable. It's not some sort of like just random psychological appreciation of cultures. Gold's properties make it superior to money from past forms of money like commodities, shell money, stone money, and other metal money. Proposition 3 is that the users of money and the holders of money want at least 3 properties of it. This is kind of a more basic philosophical understanding of money. They want it to be a unit of account, so a way of valuing everything in the economy through one standard or one yardstick. A store of value, so a way of like transmitting your economic energy and value into something that can then be stored and used later, and as a medium of exchange, so something that will be accepted everywhere. Fiat currency doesn't satisfy, of course, the store of value requirement. We got into a lot with gold, but we'll get into it again in this video as well. Fiat currency, I'm proposing, is necessary for the global economy, and it will never be fully replaced because it's instantaneous transportation of value, flexible liquidity, and low transactions costs. And so gold is still valued though in our fiat world because it can't be manipulated like fiat. It's relatively stable. It requires more effort to produce it. It stores value really well, and it's relatively easy to trust and verify. So there are advantages to gold that simply fiat currency not only can it not replace, but it will never replace by definition of what fiat currency is, i.e. state issued currency with no upfront effortfulness. We'll get into effortfulness at the end of this. So another proposition I have here is that a speedy variant of gold would be much more appealing than the current version of gold that we have if that speedy version had all the aforementioned properties of gold. So if we could somehow retain most, if not all, of the properties of gold, but make it quick, and by speedy I mean transmissible at the speed of electrons, we might have something going there. And so proposition 8, a speedy gold would never replace fiat currency because certain large actors like government desire the economic flexibility and required centralized trusts that fiat affords and demands. So again, even if we had the speedy gold, which of course this is vaguely veiled, is just Bitcoin basically, it's not going to replace fiat currency, and there's a myriad of reasons why. And again, so we're describing how gold is not competing primarily with fiat currency, and so neither is Bitcoin in my opinion. So there's a good reason to believe that money with the following properties, this is my conclusion, will likely prove valuable. So it's trust minimized, so the reliance on state actors is very low. No to low code, no to low requirement on reliance on state actors. So banks, central banks, governments, bureaucrats, and so on. It's scarce and effortful, so harder to produce than gold, and also effort intensive. Fast and final settlement, so unlike gold's physical limitations, no abstraction layer is required to have settlement happen. And then I just want to emphasize this because I didn't get to it in the other one. So what I mean by final settlement is not an abstractive layer. So if you have a money in the economy like gold, but it's too expensive and too slow to move around, you create an abstractive layer on it, in this case paper gold. And so you've got these IOU slips that are supposedly tradable or settled for gold, and you trade them around with each other over and over and over again, and you only do settlement once every increment of time. So only when we reach up to $10 trillion worth of trade will we actually then move the gold to the place at that timestamp. And of course, like when you have an abstractive layer, and of course fiat currency was introduced as an abstractive layer at Bretton Woods, so the dollar was redeemable. The dollar was redeemable for gold. The US dollar was redeemable for gold. So it was kind of like this IOU paper slip that was supposedly has a one-to-one relationship with gold, but it lost that peg. And that's because of course, like there's too much incentive by government and state actors to not maintain that peg. So final settlement again is the idea that the underlying unit that you're trading is actually reaching people, as opposed to using an abstractive IOU slip that you're using. And of course, it's at that IOU slip layer, the abstracted layer, I should say, that you can have perversions in the market. So immune to state policy, so you have some sort of decentralized issuance and rules going on with this kind of money, and infinitely transportable and digital, so digital with global accessibility. Okay, so we're going to speak to gold first and then to fiat. So we're going to talk about Bitcoin's relationship to gold and then Bitcoin's relationship to fiat, and in other words, what's good about gold and what's good about fiat and how Bitcoin might fit in. So let's go right into gold. So gold is portable. Coins are portable. It's got a great weight to value ratio. We talked about that before in the last video. So instead of having to slog around with a whole bag of copper coins, you can bring one or two gold coins, and that's because it's rare enough to have that value. Gold is highly divisible. You can melt it down into smaller denominations in coinage. You can also melt it down into bigger gold bars. World's your oyster on how much gold you want to create in a given denomination. Gold has scarcity, so it's got the right amount of scarcity. It's not too abundant. It's abundant enough to provide liquidity, but of course the fiat world does that much, much better. So this is like one of the reasons why fiat is superior than gold. You can create as many units as you want, and you can create it kind of instantaneously. But it's not as easily found as other types of money, so that its inflation rate is acceptable. Effortfulness. So gold is effortful to mine, and we're going to come back to this idea of effortfulness because it's very interesting. And I had an awakening with Bitcoin with this kind of idea of effortfulness. So roughly speaking, adding a new bar of gold to the economy means exerting some notable effort, which prevents undermining the value of the existing gold reserves. So part of the reason why the gold reserves are valued the way they are is because adding new gold requires a certain level of energy and effort and time. If you were to remove that and you could just instantaneously create gold with very little effort, we could probably imagine how that would affect the currently existing gold valuation. Okay, what gold gets right. So it's trust minimized. So gold's legitimacy does not require state actors backing. So gold can be verified to be gold. No extra steps or institutions are required in that process. And so as Lynn Alden says, no one controls the ledger of gold. It's set by nature. So then what gold gets right? Verifiability. So this is one of our last ones here. So gold can be verified with some effort. You can use testing devices that range from a couple dollars to a couple thousands of dollars, depending on how much assurance you need about the gold and also how much damage you're willing to submit the gold to. So now our question is, can Bitcoin do it better? So we got gold versus Bitcoin. Can gold do it better? So gold's portability. Any amount of Bitcoin can be stored virtually on any device. So that's a laptop, that's a phone, that's a desktop computer, that's a tablet, that's basically anything here. And you can move it on your person anywhere. So it can be done anonymously. You can board a plane with a hardware wallet carrying $10 million worth of USD. And I'm sure this has happened before. $10 million of USD worth of Bitcoin, and you can travel across several borders and no one will know. And in fact, just to put this point in a finer point, you don't actually own the coins are not in your wallet. Your wallet is just a secret phrase that identifies you as being the owner of those coins, and you don't have to have a hardware wallet. You could remember, it's a bit of a risk, but you could remember 12 to 24 length keyword seed phrase, and that's how you can walk around. So you can walk around with literally millions of dollars worth of USDT on your person via a memorization of passkeys in your head. And you can use those passkeys to essentially effectively claim ownership of your coins at any point in time that you wish. Bitcoin's divisibility. Bitcoin is highly divisible. So one Bitcoin is 100 million Satoshis. So congratulations, anyone who owns one or more Bitcoin, you are 100 millionaire, at least when it comes to Satoshis. Satoshis are the smallest denomination on the Bitcoin network and can be sent virtually individually to individual wallets. So you can send one Satoshi at a time. The transaction fees will be far exceeding the value of a Satoshi, but you could do that if you want to. Bitcoin scarcity. Bitcoin is considered ultra hard money by the Bitcoin community and by the 2024 halving, the one that we just went through last year. Much to do about that in the newspaper. Its stock to flow became lower than that of gold, and so it'll only get lower over time. So that means the total amount of Bitcoin now added yearly to the supply, relative to the supply of Bitcoin, is now at a lower rate than that of gold. Bitcoin also introduced true digital scarcity to the world for the first time in history. It's a very interesting read. There was like digital gold, there was like a digital dollar. There was these different attempts at creating what Bitcoin now is, and Bitcoin was an inflection point where that technology and those efforts came to the forefront and actually produced something tangible and sustainable. So it's a seismic shift that transcends beyond money. So I just wanted to put a fine point on that. Digital scarcity introduced to the world for the first time in 2009, something we've never seen before in the world. Since we've created digital, there's never been true scarcity. It's always been you're able to replicate the data, you're able to replicate the concept, the photo, the image. This was the first time true digital scarcity was developed. And the true digital scarcity is totally connected to, it's totally a consequence of Bitcoin's effortfulness. So, you must mine, Bitcoin must be mined through a proof of work algorithm. Lots that has been said on this in the newspaper. The energy expenditure is like, the total annual usage of energy in Sweden. It's only going to get worse over time. Miners compete to solve cryptographic puzzles by utilizing CPU power and electronic energy. The winning machine is allowed to produce a block, and the reward is Bitcoin. So the winning machine is allowed to commit a transaction to the network, and as a reward for that, it is rewarded some Bitcoin. And so blocks are produced every 10 minutes, and the difficulty changes based on the hash rate. So the hash rate goes down, and half the miners get destroyed tomorrow. The difficulty will be adjusted so that it guarantees that there's always a block produced every 10 minutes. And so, but so even though there's a block produced every 10 minutes, the reward is halved approximately every 4 years, infamously known as the Bitcoin halving, which it seems like everyone's aware of, even if they don't understand what Bitcoin is. So I should say what Bitcoin gets right here. So it's trust minimized. So trust in the Bitcoin's source code is required. Its extensive decentralized network ensures that cryptographically Bitcoin cannot be undermined. Developers can view the code and propose changes, but changes require the community as a whole to vote on them with their hashing power. So that is their nodes that they've set up in the network. And there's no trust in state actors or middlemen required, but still the base of the network is human actors. So it's not like gold in that regard. There is a human component that is not true of gold, I would say. So I did ask ChatGPT about this, or rather DeepSeek. I just wanted to go farther down this rabbit hole, talking about trust and security on Bitcoin. So there's 3 layers. There's the physical layer, the proof of work. So that's the amount of energy to expend to attack the layer itself, the network. There's the logical layer. So that's the cryptographic tools that they're actually using. SHA-256, very common, strong cryptographic layer. And there's the social layer, the consensus rules and the community norms. And so why this works, traditional systems fail at the social layer. So we've got, fiat currency in particular, corruption, regulatory capture. A Bitcoin social layer is constrained by the physical logical layers. So you can propose bad changes, but you can't force them. You can attempt fraud, but you can't profit from it. You can fork the code, but you can't force the network to join you on your fork. And so there's the ultimate safeguard. The system's most powerful feature isn't the code, it's the fact that every participant is economically incentivized to maintain the system's integrity. This creates emergent stability that no single actor can undermine. So this is like the great achievement in Bitcoin. And a lot of people are like, well, it's just an inefficient, stupid database. But if you think about what you're doing, you're storing trillions of dollars in this network at this point, or over $1 trillion, I should say. And you have mutually disinterested machines across the world incentivized to work together to maintain this network. That with open source code, that is actually a pretty astounding achievement, I would have to say. If you actually look into what's being done there, like why wouldn't they just like defect from each other and hack each other? So the genius isn't in eliminating the human factors, but in properly channeling them through clever mechanisms, cryptographic mechanisms. This is why Bitcoin survives where thousands of technically superior cryptocurrencies, so cryptocurrencies that require less energy expenditure, have smart contracts, have failed. So Bitcoin's verifiability. So transactions are verified by the most secure digital network that's ever been created. Transaction history and wallet accounts can be verified instantly, as the entire network is dedicated redundantly maintaining a large ledger of all the transactions and balances. So you're putting a lot of energy to maintain this network. We're going to talk about how writing to the network is very expensive, but reading from the network is extremely easy. In fact, all the nodes on the network are continually committed to upholding the state of the entire network, and you can easily go and traverse the blockchain vis-a-vis any of these nodes or a multitude of them to find the reality of the entire transaction history of the blockchain. So reading to the network is extremely quick and easy, and part of the reason why it's quick and easy and extremely secure as well in terms of the redundancy is because you're expending so much energy on the writing process for this. This is untrue of traditional computer science, and we'll get into that in a bit. So verification is also free and permissionless. It comes out of the network itself, like I'm saying, so it pops out as a free good that you get. You spend all this energy over here, but you're getting something really good on the other side. So anyone can verify anything, always without permission. It's an immutable global financial truth layer, unlike any system before it. So where BTC is lacking, so I don't just want to gush on and cream on about gold and Bitcoin without talking about some of the lacking parts. So obviously Bitcoin is nascent compared to gold. So gold's long dominant some millennia. Bitcoin's been around for about 15 years. It's just not the same thing. Gold could theoretically fail in ways that Bitcoin never. Gold could fail in ways that Bitcoin could fail in ways that gold never could. And we're talking about the 51% attack. Someone could own 51% of the network and then cause the nodes to start lying to each other. Bitcoin is highly energy intensive, right? That's obviously a criticism that's been in the news, much to do about that. But to be fair, mining gold is also pretty energy expensive, as well as storing and transmitting gold. So that's where Bitcoin definitely has a benefit. The storage and the transmission of it is relatively cheap. It comes out of the mining process itself, whereas in gold, you do the mining and then you do the transportation and you do the storage on separate layers. So effortful and effortless money. Okay, so we're talking about fiat versus something like basically any of the other forms of money we've ever had up until this point. So commodity money, oats and oil, decorative shells, metal tools, rare earth metals, all this money requires effort upfront to produce. So getting it into a storable, tradable format takes time and energy. So mining gold takes time and energy. Mining Bitcoin takes time and energy, right? So what the proposition here is that the time and energy comes first, and then the money, the money and the value of that money falls out of that time and effort that you've spent acquiring, collecting, mutating, finalizing the money standard. Making these intricate ornamental feathers or intricate stone shapes. Issuing fiat currency does not take time nor energy. And so this is a quote from one of the kind of younger Bitcoin thought people in the space. So no man should work for what another man can print. So the idea again is that you should not put in your effortfulness in terms of your economic activity in exchange for a unit that someone can create out of thin air. And so why? Why is that? So let's just talk about this again. So time and energy. So you've got on the hard side, commodity, shell, stone, metal money, and rights to the blockchain network. So I talked about how writing to the blockchain network is extremely expensive. That requires solving this cryptographic puzzle and then getting all the nodes to agree to that. And there's a race to solve that. So there's a lot of intensive CPU power that's being used. Fiat currency, on the other hand, it can be instantaneously produced at a nominal cost, right? So maybe the cost to produce a $100 bill is 2 or 3 cents, and then the value of that bill is supposedly $100. So this is a deep perversion from what money has traditionally been for millennia. You've inverted, and we're going to talk about that invert. You've inverted the effortfulness. Instead of the effortfulness coming first, then the money comes first, then the effort. And so just like in a traditional database, the reads and the writes of a traditional database are actually very quick and seamless. And so for most use cases, traditional database wins all day, every day, right? Why would we want anything else out of them? We want it to be quick and easy and seamless and energy efficient, right? I'm storing 1 billion users' accounts along with adjacent data about the messages that they're sending back and forth to each other. Why would I want to write more to that database? Why would I want it to be effortful? I want it to be as cheap as possible. The reason why you would want an extreme effortfulness to writes is when you're trying to store, let's say, trillions of dollars of value on that network. So Bitcoin's never been hacked in its full history, but we know that there's always been hacks, social engineering hacks, even code exploits from traditional networks. And so yes, you can set up your databases in AWS data centers, and you can split them across the world. You can get redundancy, and you can get AWS security, but it's never going to be secure enough to store billions and trillions of dollars worth of value. So you can store a billion user messages and node messages and user profiles and all this data, but that's not storing $1 trillion worth of value. Like if that data gets hacked, that's different from literally collapsing $1 trillion of value. So effortfulness and trust. So, on the one side, we've got a side that requires minimal trust in the actors that will not pervert the system to benefit themselves. And that's, of course, on the effortful money, which is basically everything but fiat. And then we've got the fiat, which requires maximal effort in actors to prevent the system that will not pervert the system to benefit themselves. So we have to trust the banks, the politicians, the bureaucrats, the central planners, the central bankers, that they will not do things to help either themselves or people who they're connected to, either politically or economically. So again, there's two things that are happening with hard money. One is that when you have a hard money, you don't have to trust state actors. And that's one thing. It's kind of like the trust in the ecosystem itself goes way, way down, because the effort was done first, right? Then the money was produced. So once you're at the unit of money, you don't have to have as much trust. The time horizon is also another thing that we're talking about, which is when is the effortfulness put into the money? So one question is, does X money promote saving or spending? Does having high credit or going into debt? So we know that we live in a debt-based world, and I would argue, and I think a lot of people would, that is a direct consequence of living in a fiat world. So living in a fiat world and living in a debt-driven world where you're economically incentivized to go into debt are basically the same thing. They're attached at the hip here. So the proposition is that fiat money shifts the time horizon. So the money system, a money system that chronically lowers your purchasing power, does at least two things. It incentivizes everyone to go into debt. Because again, why would you sit on your store of cash and put it under your bed? You're a fucking idiot if you do that. And the second is that it benefits those who can go more into debt. So every single probably economic system that we could describe, including Bitcoin, probably has perversions that help some actors in the ecosystem more than others. I think overall Bitcoin, from what I understand, is a lot more egalitarian in this view, but I'm not going to claim that it's perfect. But in the fiat system, there definitely is that perversion. There are people who can go into debt harder, quicker, and faster than you for a variety of reasons, because they already own capital, because they've been granted capital, because they own a company, and they're able to outcompete you in going into debt. So you can go to the bank and you can ask for a certain loan, but you're only going to get so much. But other actors in this economy can ask for a lot more, and that's already a massive perversion in the system in terms of the egalitarianness of it. So conclusion here, Bitcoin has many advantages to gold. Gold, oh, sorry, I said but money, many advantages to fiat currency. And so if gold survives and grows, if Bitcoin survives and grows, it will eventually surmount gold as the preferable, effortful, hard money. So again, we've got this idea that effortful, hard money I've tried to describe here between both the last video and this one is actually something we should be interested in. I've described how fiat is different and how it invites perversions into the system and also changes our time horizon, our psychological understanding of how we should be interacting with this money system. And that benefits some actors in the economy more than others. And so there's always going to be use, or always going to be value, or always going to be some sort of value with hard money. And if Bitcoin can be a hard money that has a lot of the properties of gold, but is actually better in multiple ways, which we've discussed, it might be a contender to gold, right? And I just want to note here, none of the above that I've said requires that gold will become valueless or useless. No one here is claiming that. If you hear Bitcoiners saying that, they're probably stupid. I'm not claiming that fiat will be replaced by Bitcoin and crypto. I think if you're claiming that, again, you're pretty ignorant. I think that Satoshi or the group of individuals who created Bitcoin understood global finances, understood debt creation, understood computer science at pretty high levels, I would say. So when this person or group of people decided to limit Bitcoin's transaction to 7 transactions per second, they obviously knew that the Visa network does like 25,000 transactions per second. So there is a technical inability for Bitcoin to ever compete with these other networks. And that was done intentionally because the security properties of Bitcoin were more important than the throughput or the speediness properties of Bitcoin. So it was never meant to compete with fiat currency or the financial transaction layers like Visa and MasterCard. Bitcoin wasn't. I'm just saying Bitcoin wasn't. I think other cryptos can and will eventually do that. And so I'm not asserting any of those things here. I'm not asserting anything else unless previously specified. And I will just say here before I end that, I think Bitcoiners and people in the crypto community get things really wrong really often, and it's because they haven't done this type of deep dive. So while there's very few people watching my videos, and I appreciate why, I'm not like editing them and making them super fancy, at the same time, so many people in the space need to have done a more foundational research to understand why we're here, where we're going, and to have that kind of conviction that I now have. So I'm saying that I could get it wrong. Bitcoin could crash tomorrow. I don't have a crystal ball. There's always a risk here, but I'm trying to understand where we came from and where we're going in terms of crypto, and what are the foundational propositions that are based on rational thought. And also, I will say as an add-on, I think by doing this research, it is helping to explain. It's helping to explain better than most people that I meet why Bitcoin's gone from pennies to hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Over $100,000 Canadian, even today. So again, there is a phenomenon that's happened. There's something that's happened in the world of crypto. Most people throwing up their hands and saying, well, I heard some smart person, Warren Buffett, says it's stupid, or JP Morgan says it's rat poison, or whatever, whoever it is. They said it's stupid, it's a pet rock, it's dumb. And they just put their hands up as this thing keeps growing and changing. And I'm going like, let's actually go back and look at the foundations of why Bitcoin was created, the history of true digital scarcity online, the attempt to create something like digital gold or digital cash. Where did they fail? And then what were the theoretical underpinnings of creating something like a Bitcoin? And when we look at that, we find out that this is not a made up story. This was actually from the start what people were trying to do. And it does help explain the value proposition here. Hey, maybe they've kind of succeeded, at least in partially in their goals. And that's why it's exuding value. Yes, there's crashes. Yes, there's always there's a lot of speculation. But after the crash, we always get a higher low than the previous low, and we build up to another manic high. So there's something going on there. Anyways, thanks so much for your time. I'm Adam. This was Satoshi Chain, and take care. Bye now.